On Tuesday, you get to vote. Now, we get caught up in voting for our representatives. They're the ones who act as our proxies. But there's a bit more to it than that. Ballot proposals. Every year, there are questions asked of us that would directly change our state constitution. This year, there are 3, starting with a big one, a constitutional convention. Okay, ballot measure number 1. Now, this is one that you may have actually heard about, and one that comes up every 20 years. Here it is. Shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and amend the same? A short sentence, of course, but there's a lot that goes into it. This would be a total reworking of the Constitution, and if it's approved, it would require another entire election cycle to select who would be assigned to this convention. These people would meet in Albany. They would need a full staff, and of course travel expenses, and they could be from anywhere in the state. And you know what that means? Lots of tax dollars. So those who support it see it as a means to change things such as term limits, making legislatures full-time employees, and as a way to clean up Albany or state government in general. Now, there have been a lot of voices against.
Constitutional Convention ballot. What is your position?
I think it would be an interesting process, but I'm against it.
I'm against it.
So at this time, I'm against the convention.
I'm against it as well. I will be voting no on CON this year.
I too am against it.
People feel that it would jeopardize public employee union benefits, also the access to public services, as well as allow for special interests to gain further influence in Albany. As you can see, this measure could do a lot of good, but it could also do a lot of harm. It is a gamble. Okay, now on to ballot measure 2, an amendment to the Constitution. Wait, what? You can amend the Constitution nearly every year by voting? Well, anyway, here's what measure 2 reads. The proposed amendment to Section 7 of the state constitution would allow a court to reduce or revoke the public pension of a public officer who is convicted of a felony and that has a direct and actual relationship to the performance of the public officer's existing duties. Shall the proposed amendment be approved? Now, this one seems straightforward, I know. And with the recent history of corruption in Albany, this seems quite relevant. Such penalties would, however, be mostly up to the courts. The reduction or revocation would not be automatic and would take into consideration that person's dependents and their well-being. So in other words, this would allow judges another option when they're sentencing convicted public servants. Now, what you're going to see on ballot measure 3 is a whole heck of a lot of reading. Here's what it says. The proposed amendment will create a land account with up to 250 acres of forest preserve land eligible for use by towns, villages, and counties that have no viable alternative to using forest preserve land to address specific public health and safety concerns. As a substitute for the land removed from the forest preserve, another 250 acres of land will be added to the forest preserve, subject to legislative approval. The proposed amendment also will allow bicycle trails and certain public utility lines to be located within the width of specified highways that cross the forest preserve while minimizing removal of trees and vegetation. Shall the proposed amendment be approved? Now, essentially what we have here is New York State would create a so-called savings account. This would be of land where a town, village, or city could apply to use some of the forest preserve to benefit its people. Now, statewide, there would be 250 acres in this so-called savings account. Any land displaced would be created somewhere else so that we're not depleting our natural resources. It's a good idea. Now, where that new land would go is ultimately up to the legislature. In the full text, it also specifies that this would not permit construction of any gas or oil pipelines that have not been approved before June 1st, 2016, a very important provision. So, this would allow for public safety measures to be enacted. Now, that's good. Dangerous curves in forest preserves can be reduced, and sewer lines and water lines can be placed, fixed, or upgraded. Also, it allows for bike paths to be created, which makes very vulnerable bicyclists much safer. Now, because the new land that would be created is up to the legislature, as I mentioned, there would be issues with location, timeline, execution, etc. Also in the full text, they use this language, quoting, minimize the removal of trees and vegetation. But there's no mechanism to judge what this means, so it could have unintended impacts. So there you have it, 3 opportunities for us voters to act as legislators. These measures give us an opportunity to represent ourselves and decide on an actual law. Griping about not voting because of bad candidates should not be an excuse to stay home this election day. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time on Common Ground.